January 4th, 2024. We're here at Love Farm Stay. And for those of you who are curious about living off grid, Mama said there'd be days like today. And if you're interested in solar panels, solar technology, the whole idea of living off grid, Mama said there'd be days like today. And this is something that people who are looking into getting off grid may be overlooking. So wherever you're thinking about living off grid, keep in mind the days of sunshine. If you're aiming to get solar power, look up how much sun does this place get and do the satanic overlords geoengineer or do cloud seeding or solar radiation management in that area. Apparently there's some places in the world that don't do quote unquote chemtrails, but most everywhere I have been in the world, there is some type of chemtrails in the sky. Most everywhere that I've been, and that's the long-term overarching plan, I'm sure. And one of the things that directly or indirectly happen as a result of all this geoengineering is that there is a blanket of separation between your solar panels and the arc reactor in the sky. So, for example, on days like today where it's overcast and they've been spraying in the skies since New Year's pretty aggressively to the point where even my kids are pointing it out. Whereas we had 2 days of no chemtrails or no planes in the sky, I guess, because all the planes everywhere leave chemtrails all the time. So I guess every flight was grounded for 2 days for some reason, which is just a fabrication of your imagination, not mine. Anyway, if you have one 120 watt solar panel, which would be considered an average solar panel, on days like today where there's a cloud between you, your solar panel, and the sun, expect something between 10 and 20 watts maximum coming in. Even if you have a 120 watt solar panel, 10 to 15 or 10 to 20 watts is all you're going to get until you get some break in the clouds. And nobody can really prepare you for that. It's something that you need to understand on your own, and which is why it's good to know your environment before you consider getting off grid. So I like to have, like right now, currently, I have an array of solar panels and I have one that's singled out individually. So I can do the math myself. Like if you have one solar panel, right? Just set up one solar panel and then put a digital interface on it or download an app for a digital interface so you can see on days like today. Okay, if I have one solar panel, this is what it's getting. And you times that by however many solar panels you actually have. And then you know exactly how many amps, how many watts, how many volts you're getting. Right? Makes sense? That would be my advice. They sell 400 watt solar panels and higher probably. I've seen 400 watt solar panels. But again, on days like today, it doesn't matter what the ideal arc reactor directly over your solar panel says, because you're not going to get the ideal. You're going to get 10, 20 watts, right? This is why people have solar farms. And on days like today, where people are selling electricity, a lot of farmers here in Portugal have turned to solar farming because who wants oranges anymore? Who wants lemons anymore? There's oranges and lemons and carob in abundance here. And there has to be a market for it, right? So normally it's clear skies here. And as you can see, today is not one of those days. So on days like today, you have to be prepared with an alternative. So solar panels, even if you have a solar farm full of solar panels on days like today, just safe to say you're not making any money if you're trying to sell back to the grid or sell to a utility company, right? Days like today are bad days for solar farmers. Even if you have a solar array like a football field long, you know, maybe a couple hundred watts max if it's like this all day. Do you follow what I'm saying? It doesn't matter whether your solar panel says 400 or 500 or a bajillion watts. If you have a blanket between the arc reactor and your solar panels like this, you're not getting anything. You're lucky to get... I saw on my solar panel today like 10 watts, 20 watts, and then there's like, it breaks up and then you see the sun occasionally and you get a little bit. My point is, if you want to live off grid, the Algarve, where I am, has 300 days of sun, and it doesn't lie. So those numbers don't lie. You look at the 65 remaining days, and it's kind of overcast, kind of rainy, and that is what we call the rainy season here in Portugal. Portugal, in my estimation, does not get winter. Coming from Canada, I would say to my fellow Canadians or people from North America that you can expect summer, spring, and a splash of autumn. And that's it. So those 3 seasons. The summers will be hotter than you're used to. There will be 5 really hot days or 6 really hot days. And there'll be a few chilly days. But for the most part, summer, spring, and a splash of autumn. As you can see, we're here on the farm at Love Farmstay growing things. That's a green pepper growing right there, and it looks delicious. Pineapple, my banana circle. So I am preparing and have been preparing for the warmer months and the upcoming summer. So I have lots of water there, lots of water here. We did the math the other day, but basically it's like 2,600 liters of fluid. Some of it's gray water for the thirsty bananas and palm trees, and most of it is rainwater and some borehole water. So on days like today where it's overcast, how do you prepare? Apparently, this little solar light that I have was charged enough to give us a nice little flicker. I have a few of these solar lights that kind of just illuminate pathways around the property. But basically, you have to have a backup. And maybe people don't want to talk about this, but when you have a backup plan for living off grid, it's not just, have more batteries. Batteries are only as good as they are charged. And at some point, anybody who uses a cell phone or drives a battery-powered car, at some point, anyone who uses those things can tell you the batteries die, and then you're left with a nothing burger. You're left with a lump of electric circuits and whatnot that aren't working. So you have to think about other ways to get electricity. So there's many different ways to get electricity. Tesla knew it, Edison knew it. One thing you can do, if you're thinking about geographically where to live off grid, one thing you can do is get a property that has a river running through it constantly. That would be so cool, because then you could avoid this hassle of having to, recapture gray water. You'd be like, what do I need gray water for? I got fresh river water all the time. I think ideally that would be better, or rainwater would be better, right? So if you have a property off grid with a river running through it, then you can stick in a turbine, like a hydro turbine, and create electricity from just your average alternator that would give you 12, 13 volts. And then you hook that up to some type of regulator or inverter if you're charging batteries or taking it straight, depending on how you're doing it. And you could charge batteries with that to store your amperage and your longevity. The thing about amperage is, as a technician, people don't understand amperage, but if you are, say you're running like 5 toasters at the same time, it's going to pull a lot of amperage, maybe 5 times 400. So 5, 10, 15, 2,000 watts pulling. So imagine 2,000 watts pulling, or 2,000 amps. No, bad example. 2,000 watts, and let's say 40 amps pulling. You might trip a breaker. And if you don't have a breaker on your hydro generator setup, then you might blow the circuitry inside or the coil around the carbon brushes. If it has carbon brushes, or if it's a brushless motor, you might seize up something or burn something out inside trying to power so many things or that require high amperage. So, but if you charge batteries and the batteries have a high amperage output, you can store the amp power there. It acts like a capacitor bank or an amperage energy storage bank for those oomph moments. There's a startup capacitor, run capacitor on a lot of fridges and motors. And so that extra watts can be measured in basically 3 times the amount of watts that it takes on average while it's running. But anyway, this is all side jags. I'm just saying that, like, if you could get a property off grid with a river running through it, you'd be killing a bajillion birds with 1 stone, or feeding a bajillion birds with 1 scone if you're vegan. That would be my advice. So, but that might not work. You might have problems with that. Your generator one day that you're building with an alternator might have a problem. So I would put 2 down in the river and make sure they both work. And failing all that, have a backup for the backup and get a generator, just a regular gas powered generator. I have 2 of them. One is 3,000. Actually, they're both around 3,000 watts. So on days like today, basically you can, some people just directly run the generator, and as long as they're using things, they have the generator on. I do not recommend that. That seems like a fool's way to do it, and it's a great waste of fuel. So my advice would be to get some batteries that you can charge while your generator is running, and then have batteries that can run through an inverter and give you whatever power you're going to be using. In this case, because we're in Europe, I need 220 volts at 15 amps or 14 amps. There's very few things that will pull that full 14 amps through the circuit. Like, I don't even have a microwave, but that could do it, or a space heater could do it. Just something to keep in mind. These are things that you have to keep in mind on days like today. So the batteries, for example, if I had fully charged batteries from the solar panels yesterday and they somehow made it through the entire night of the fridge running and the flushes and the gadgets being charged, then today they would have been depleted all day because there's no arc reactor charging through my solar panels. So do you see the problem? Batteries, as many batteries as you want. You can have 100 batteries. You could have a bajillion, million, trillion, quadrillion batteries. At some point, they're going to die if this type of weather keeps up. So always keep a backup plan in mind. Perfect scenario would be to have a river, to have your hydro generation power that I'm talking about, and to have solar panels, to have a generator as a backup. And then a few different type of off-grid battery systems like the River EcoFlow 2 or the Blue Eddy, something like an RV camper battery. Like, if all else can possibly fail, if everything has failed, you still have one surefire thing that you could just like charge from your car. Most people don't know this, but you can just literally take out your car battery and use that as a power source if you have an inverter. So have an inverter handy, have a couple inverters that you could take. If all else fails, your 12-volt DC battery out of your car, invert it through an inverter, positive and negative, and on the other side you would have 120 volts or 220 volts if you're in Europe. It's one last, final, absolute worst case scenario type of situations. But if you live in a country like this, like Portugal or Spain, or in a Mediterranean climate, these type of worst case scenarios really aren't going to happen because you have 300 days of sun and nobody can freeze to death in the Algarve because we don't get freezing temperatures here in this microclimate. So this is why I'm outside in January in flip-flops and shorts. So location is everything, as I've said repeatedly, and I hope that this video has helped you along your off-grid adventures. This is Adam signing off from Love Farmstay. If you found any value in this video, feel free to buy me a coffee in the link in the description of this video. You can go to adamjosh.com and see all the links. You can come visit us at Love Farmstay. I can teach you about gray water and go into depth on any of these topics that I already discussed. And you can learn about farming. Take care, everybody. Bye. Are you tired of reincarnating? Me too. Now show the world that you don't want to reincarnate with this Do Not Reincarnate t-shirt.